The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Fiza stood before the assembly of alien delegates. Her dark eyes scanned the diverse species gathered, the crystalline Vexteri, the floating gas beings of Nephoria, and dozens of others who had survived the relentless attacks of the Devourers for centuries. "You keep asking why humans are never targeted," Fiza said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Today you'll understand." Beside her, Commander Stein activated the holographic display. His weathered face showed no emotion as images of devastated worlds flickered into view, planets stripped bare, civilizations erased, entire species reduced to nothing but memories and mourning. The Vexteri representative, a being of living crystal named Orcs, leaned forward. "For 300 cycles, the Devourers have ravaged our sectors. They have consumed the Thelians, broken the mighty Korothi Empire, and left the Sisterhood of Ilos in ruins. Yet Earth, a primitive world with no planetary shields, no quantum weapons, no hive mind defense, remains untouched. Why?" Fiza exchanged a glance with Stein. They had debated revealing this truth for months. The Council deserved to know, but the knowledge came with a terrible burden. "Because," Stein began, his voice gravelly from years of commanding warships, "the Devourers tried to target Earth once. 60 years ago, long before we joined the galactic community." The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Fiza raised her hand for silence. "In 1965, by Earth's calendar, a Devourer scout fleet arrived in our solar system," she continued. 3 biomechanical ships, each capable of processing an entire moon into raw materials. They approached Earth with the same methodical efficiency they use everywhere. The hologram shifted, showing grainy black and white footage recovered from old military archives. The images were primitive by galactic standards, but they captured the moment humanity first encountered the galaxy's greatest nightmare. "What happened?" asked Ambassador Threll of the Nephori Collective, their gaseous forms swirling with anxiety. Stein's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Humans happened." The hologram showed a barren testing ground in a place called Nevada. Missiles launched. Explosions bloomed. But these weren't ordinary weapons, these were atomic bombs. Primitive fusion devices that humans had developed not for exploration or energy, but for the sole purpose of destroying each other. "Your species, ... Quorix's crystalline voice trembled. "You possessed weapons of mass destruction before achieving We possessed them before we even left our own planet," Fiza confirmed. "We created tools capable of rendering our world uninhabitable, and we did it decades before we reached our own moon." The footage continued. The Devourer ships, expecting biological resistance or perhaps electromagnetic pulses, were unprepared for the thermonuclear onslaught. The first ship's shields buckled under the sustained bombardment. The second attempted to retreat but was intercepted by a coordinated strike from 5 nations that had been enemies the day before. "The third ship managed to land," Stein said, his voice distant with memory. "In the Tunguska region of Russia. What happened next became classified at the highest levels." The hologram showed aftermath images of a massive crater, scorched earth, and in the center, the twisted remains of biomechanical technology surrounded by the burnt remnants of conventional and nuclear weaponry. "Ground forces engaged the survivors," Fiza explained. "Men and women armed with chemical weapons, flamethrowers, and a willingness to die to protect their world. The Devourers had conquered species with technology centuries beyond ours, but they had never encountered anything quite like human desperation. A small species called the Lut, barely 3 feet tall but renowned for their tactical brilliance, spoke up. But surely the Devourers have faced desperate species before. The Korothi fought to their last breath." "The Korothi fought bravely," Stein agreed. "But humans, we fight dirty. We don't have honor protocols limiting our weapons. We don't have treaties preventing scorched earth tactics. When we fight for survival, there are no rules." Fiza pulled up another document, a decoded Devourer transmission intercepted years later. "This is from the surviving Devourer scout. It was transmitted before we destroyed their communications array." The translation appeared in the common tongue. "Species 7351 designation: human exhibits extreme territorial aggression, possess disproportionate destructive capability relative to technological advancement. Individual units display irrational willingness to sacrifice for collective survival. Adaptive combat response exceeds all predictive models. Recommendation: avoid system. Resource acquisition not worth expenditure. Tag as predator species." The chamber fell absolutely silent. "They tagged you," Threll whispered, "as predators. The Devourers are scavengers," Fiza explained. "They prey on the weak. the divided, the civilized species, who fight by rules and honor codes. They avoid predator species too costly to hunt, too dangerous to approach. Quarix's crystalline form dimmed with understanding. You became too expensive to kill. Stein nodded. Every ship they sent to Earth never returned. Every probe was shot down. Every attempt to scout our defenses was met with overwhelming, indiscriminate force. Eventually, they calculated that Earth wasn't worth it. Easier to target species who would evacuate civilians, who would hesitate to use weapons of mass destruction, who would try to negotiate or surrender honorably. But that's— the Luthani delegate struggled for words. That's monstrous. Yes, Visa agreed quietly. It is. We've spent the last 60 years trying to become better, trying to build a civilization that values peace and cooperation. We joined the Galactic Council hoping to learn from species who evolved beyond the need for such savagery. But that savagery, it's still there, buried deep in our genetic memory, ready to surface the moment someone threatens our home. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes or equivalent sensory organs of each delegate. You asked why humans are never targeted. Now you know. The Devourers learned what the galaxy is slowly discovering. Humans are the species who will burn down the universe before we let someone take our world. We're the species who invented extinction-level weapons and pointed them at ourselves just to prove we could. We're the species who, when faced with an unstoppable enemy, didn't ask how do we survive, but how do we make them regret coming here. Stein deactivated the hologram. The question isn't why the Devourers don't target Earth, Ambassador. The question is, do you want to learn from the species they're afraid of, or do you want to keep being victims? The chamber erupted in debate, but Fiza saw it in their eye-sphere. Yes, but also hope. Humanity's darkness might just be the light the galaxy needed to survive. And in the depths of space, Devourer fleets continued their harvest, carefully routing around one small blue planet that had taught them a lesson they would never forget. Some prey becomes predator when cornered, and some predators were never prey to begin with.